Welcome to Hospitality Talks. My name is Sam-Erik Ruttmann, and my partner in crime, other way hand here, is Abid. We are very pleased because we have been traveling around the world and discussing with industrial leaders. So far, we'll be going live every week with Abid, and this time I'm very, very pleased that we have some great leadership that are experts in the African tourism industry issues. And so let me hand over to Abid.
Thank you very much, Sam. Welcome back to Hospitality Talks, everybody, in our series discussing industry challenges during this pandemic. I hope you and your loved ones are safe. I'm Abid. In our attempt to understand the depths of COVID-19 pandemic on hospitality around the globe, we are bringing the next phase of our discussions, and this time with professionals that have great knowledge of Africa. Africa is a diverse continent with more than 50 countries that are united under the brand Africa. Our panel today includes Mossadeck Bally, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Azalai Hotels, and Paul Mack, who's Director for the Latitude Hotels. Unfortunately, David Harper is not able to join us because of a power outage in his area. So as far as Africa is concerned, thus far has had less reported infections and fatalities than some of the other geographies. All of us during this time continue to ask, when will this end and when will we go back? As we have come to terms with the turbulent times, maybe the right question at this point is, how do we continue, as there might not be any going back, and possibly the only way out is going through and deploying an operating model that can accommodate extreme level of uncertainty. To start us out with this discussion, I'd like to bring on Mossadeck, but before we start our conversation, again, a heartfelt gratitude to the essential workers around the world that keeping all of us safe. So thank you again for all you do, for all the rest of us and keeping us safe. So let me bring Mossadeck on. Mossadeck, I hope you are well, and I hope your day has gone well. Mossadeck, it seems like we can't hear you, so I'm not sure if you are muted.
We should be all connected here.
Well, for those of you who might or might not be familiar with Azalai Hotels, their presence is in Western Africa with multiple markets that they operate in. Hopefully the sound will be taken care of, and majority of their hotels are owned and operated, with a couple that are leased situations. So Mossadeck will be able to help us understand what the operating environment is. And I believe we have the sound back. Is that correct, Mossadeck?
Yes, sorry.
Perfect. Here we are. So, welcome.
Thank you for having me on this show. Happy to be with you. I am Mossadeck Bally, the founder and CEO of Azalai Hotels Group, which is a West African hotel chain owning and operating 10 hotels in 6 West African countries under our own brand, Azalai Hotels brand. And we are in the business segment of the hospitality industry, and we are in the mid-scale segment. So we cater mainly to business travelers.
Thank you, Mossadeck. Thanks for joining us. Could you just, for our listeners and just to get us started, could you just give us a general update of how many of your hotels are operating, which markets are hotels are shut down, and sort of a general update on the state of business, please?
As I said, we have 10 properties. We started 25 years ago in Mali, and then we went to Burkina Faso, Benin, Guinea-Bissau, Mauritania, and the Ivory Coast. And we have 4 projects going on in Senegal, Guinea-Conakry, Niger, and Cameroon. Out of the 10 properties, 8 are closed. 1 and 2 are open here in Bamako. 1 has been fully rented by the European Union to host their training mission for the Malian army. So they've been in the hotel for 5 years now. And we just reopened our first property, our iconic property, Grand Hotel de Bamako, which we closed at the beginning of the pandemic, and we reopened it 10 days ago because the government of Mali wanted to use it to quarantine some Malians who came abroad. They are not sick, but they were quarantined for 14 days before they can go home. So out of the 10 properties we own and manage, 8 are closed and 2 are open.
Oh, great. So how long have the hotels that have been shut down, how long have they been out of operation, Mossadeck?
Roughly 3 weeks now. We decided to close the properties by the middle of March. So roughly 3 weeks to 1 month.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't all close at the same time. Some of them closed right away around mid-March. Some of them closed 2 weeks ago. For example, our property in Cotonou was rented by the government of Benin, and we closed it just 1 week ago. And the property in Ivory Coast closed 2 weeks ago. So they didn't all close at the same time.
So just can you tell us and tell our viewers, what has Azalai Hotels done to address various stakeholders? Certainly you own a lot of your hotels, but relative to associates, guests, your clients, anything specific that you might have done during this time?
Well, first when the pandemic broke out, we had to first priority the security and the health of our associates. So we did all the barriers that the World Health Organization advised. So the hotels were opened. We had customers in the hotels. So we had masks for our associates. We had the hydroalcoholic sanitizations. So we had some really strict regulations for our associates. We took temperatures when you came into the hotel. That's what we did as the first barrier measures when the pandemic broke out. And after we decided to close the hotels, of course, unfortunately, we had to furlough our employees. So today, roughly 90% of the associates, the employees, are staying home. And as you know, unfortunately, in most of the African countries, I would say almost all the African countries, we don't have an employment benefit. So unfortunately, we managed to pay the salaries for March, even though we didn't work the full months. But we managed to pay full compensation during the month of March. But for the month of April, unfortunately, we will not be able to pay the compensation. So our employees are staying home without revenue. That is something which is very, very difficult for us. But as I said, we are an African hotel chain. We operate in African countries, and we don't have unemployment benefits, unfortunately, in our organization. We also had discussions, and we're still having discussion with the bankers, with the people who bring to us the debt, and we are trying to manage to rearrange, to reprofile our debt with our bankers. Of course, we had a conversation with also our owners, our board members. So in this time of severe crisis, communication is key. And we make sure that we communicate with all the stakeholders. We started with the employees because they were the first one to be hardly hit by the crisis because they lost their job and they don't have any revenue today. And then we had a discussion with the board members, with the owners, to let them know what is our crisis management plan. And then we had discussion with the bankers to see how we can reprofile our debt, to stop, of course, the interest, and to see how we can reprofile the debt. And then we had discussions also with the various governments in each country where we are. That's on a broader side with all the hoteliers. We went to see our ministers, the prime ministers, to see what can be done to support our industry in this difficult time. As you know, the travel industry, the hospitality industry is a first-line industry, and we are the most hit by this crisis.
Well, Mossadeck, that's a great segue. You operate across 6 different countries, different laws possibly. Have the governments in these jurisdictions extended any help to hospitality industry? I'm sure all of us are in it together, but hospitality industry is almost the worst hit. Anything that the governments have done to help the industry?
Well, the governments in all the 6 countries where we are operating, each government had a kind of a stimulus plan, a kind of urgency plan, but most of these urgency plans are geared toward what they call social classes, people without revenues, hospitals, poor people. And for the time being, we didn't see any help going toward our own employees who today lost their jobs and don't have any revenue. There are discussions in progress. We hope that there will be some kind of help toward our employees. Some countries defer the payment of taxes and income taxes especially. As you know, or maybe you don't know, in most of our countries here in West Africa, we have to declare our income taxes by the end of April, and corporate taxes, I mean, by the end of April. We think that that will be postponed to maybe June or July. It depends on the country, but I think each country is eager now to postpone that date. Also, the Central Bank of West Africa decided that each commercial bank should or must, we don't know yet if it should or must, postpone the repayment of the debt for at least 3 months, renewable once. So altogether 6 months without paying any interest on that postponing of repayments. So these are the kind of measures we saw. Some countries like Ivory Coast, they put a fund to support the SMEs. For example, Ivory Coast, they put in place, I think, 15 million euros fund to support the SMEs. But how will that work? We don't have all the details yet. In Senegal also, they have a stimulus plan to support the SMEs and the private companies. There isn't yet a specific support plan for the hospitality industry. I haven't seen any yet in all the countries we are in. In Niger, for example, where we have a project, they decided to reduce the VTA on hospitality, which was at 18%, and now they brought it down to 10%, which is a good measure, but not for now, but for the future, because all the hotels in Niger are also closed. So it's a good economic measure for the future to bring the VTA rate from 18% to 10%.
I think you're absolutely correct regarding communication, because though it is a humanitarian crisis, but the economic impact is huge and it's global. So keeping in constant conversations with policymakers and financial institutions and associates and guests will help us in the long run, and also to keep this industry front and center. Hence the reason why we have started this series of hospitality talks. Any new initiatives that you might have implemented, Mossadeck, during this pandemic and in preparation of post-pandemic era?
Well, our teams are working very hard. Even those who are at home are still working. Our chief operating officer with our marketing department, our sales department, and the GMs are working on a recovery plan to make sure that our hotels are ready when the customer will start traveling and will start staying in the hotel. So we are working on a communication plan, but we are working first on a sanitization plan. We are researching for best practices. We saw that all the big international chains now are working on a sanitization plan to get ready and to reassure the customer that once traveling is possible, they will stay in a safe hotel. We are also working on that kind of plan to see what are the best practices in that kind of sanitization plan for the hotels. Of course, today our associates are very well trained for the COVID-19 barrier measure that the World Health Organization is advocating. The mask, the gel, and all this stuff is quite well, I would say, masterized by our associates today. We are working on a communication plan, of course, which is key. There is no blackout in our communication. We keep communicating with our customers. We keep talking with them. We keep sending them information on what we are doing now to make sure that we are ready again to host them in the hotels. Of course, we hope that we will have a common ground with our financiers to reprofile the debt so that we can have some oxygen and breathe and be ready to host again our customers. We keep dialogue. We keep the dialogue with the governments to see what type of package we can have once we get the green light and the get to go and host our customers again. What can we have from the governments in terms of economic package? And as I said, for us, the number one priority is to make sure when our associates come back to work, when our employees come back to work, they work in a very safe environment. and also make sure that when our customers come back, they are safe, but moreover, they feel safe to travel, and they feel safe to stay in a hotel. So that's what we are working on. So it's challenging times, but we are quite confident that, as Martin Luther King said, we shall overcome.
And so shall we. It's absolutely, industry is very resilient. Human beings will overcome this. It's just the matter of time, and being prepared for the restart is pivotal, so that we are able to make sure that the consumers we have their confidence, as well as the entire supply chain, whether it's the vendors, whether it's our associates, how the consumers buy. So being prepared for the restart is unequivocally very, very important. So I applaud you for that, and thanks for sharing that. Sam?
Yes, thank you very much for, it's very inspiring, and what you are doing in the current very challenging environment. I have a couple of questions. Could you share with us the kind of channels you are using to communicate with your customers, or how you're communicating, let's say, with your associates to keep them abreast of what is going on at the moment, just to let them know that they are becoming also, that everyone is aware that for the time when you're ready to open up the doors again?
Well, with our associates, we use telephone, WhatsApp. With our customers, we use mainly emails to keep them updated on what we are doing to get ready and host them when they are ready to come, of course. So we use mainly emails, telephone with our associates, WhatsApp, our LinkedIn account also, and our Twitter account.
Very good. No, I know from what I read about Africa that you are very advanced in using the mobile networks like the WhatsApp, and also for payment systems. It's a very, very, probably more advanced than we have it in Finland, in fact. So I'm really impressed about that.
Yeah, that's true. You know, in terms of mobile banking, Africa has really leapfrogged. And for example, we decided to buy masks for our associates and their entire family. And since they were no more commuting to come and work, so we use mobile banking to send them money to buy masks.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a very, very powerful statement you just made.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
And if the day you are, because this is maybe the for many of us is the sort of the most crucial situation that has happened, at least for many people in of this generation with this pandemic. If there's one particular thing from your point of view that you will treasure as that was the key learning point for you when you hopefully when you were looking back, went back into normal, what would that be for you?
Communication. It's really definitely the key. When we decided to close the hotel, we had town hall meetings with our associates, and we were very transparent, crystal clear. We told them that we were no more able to keep them working because we will not be able to pay any compensation for the work they will be doing. And we will make efforts to pay the month of March, but after March it won't be possible. So we were very transparent. We had a very good communication with them. And true enough, they really understood. I mean, they understood, although they, of course, today after 1 month, they won't have any more revenue, but they understood that the situation was beyond control, and it was not something we did with pleasure. So communication, transparency, for me is key in this kind of situation. communication transparency with associates first, with all the rest of the stakeholders, the owners, the financiers. Be very transparent and communicate regularly and keep them updated. For us, at least, for me, that's what I really learned from this crisis. And when you communicate on a transparent basis, regularly, and then your messages can go through very easily.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Mossadeck, for your comments. Abid?
So what segments do you anticipate that will have the most potential in restart? Who would come back first?
Business travelers, because they have business to take care of. As you see, we are in 6 countries. Some of them are in the Sahel region. And we have been managing crisis for many years, especially the security crisis in the Sahel region, in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger. And what we learned is that business travelers, maybe they change their travel patterns, but they have business to take care of, and they will come. Of course, they will take precautions, but they will come even if there is a security crisis in the country. So I think, same for the COVID pandemic, I think the first travelers who will hit the road will be the business travelers. I think the leisure part of the industry will pick up much later on.
During this pandemic, of course, a lot of the airlines have stopped operating, and some of these airlines might not be able to fly again. Their fixed cost component is huge. So as airlift drops into certain markets, whether it's for regional traffic or it is for international traffic, hotels are somewhat reliant on accessibility. How do you think that will impact the African continent in general, but also specifically the markets that you operate in?
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. No air traffic, no hotel business. I totally agree with you. And I must say that the news I have been reading these couple of days on the airline industry is quite scary, But I do believe that people will start traveling again. Business travelers will have to take care of their businesses, so they will travel. At some point, people will travel for leisure. So in Africa, we unfortunately don't have enough airlink within Africa. It has developed quite well these past years, but we are still lacking behind Europe, America, and Asia, of course. I just read an article on Ethiopian Airlines really struggling to stay alive, which is our biggest airline. We really hope that the likes of Ethiopian Airlines, Kenya Airways, Royal Air Maroc will be around when the pandemic is over, because they are key players in our industry. Unfortunately, it looks like that SAA will disappear, at least in its government form. Maybe some private investors will take over SAA. Concerning the hospitality industry, what I see is a pickup first in domestic demand. For example, MICE. People who have budget to organize seminars, conferences, meetings, once the pandemic is over and we have the green light, I see a pickup first in the domestic demand, in the MICE demand. And then the intra-Africa travel will come in. And after that, the international travel will come in. So I see it as a three-phase recovery: domestic demand, intra-Africa travel demand, and international travel demand.
I think the entire process of going across borders is going to be a big challenge. Not only that the security issues that we've all dealt with for a few years now, not only that would be in place, but also now this health issue is taken into account. A lot of the airports now have the temperature scanners and trying to make sure that they can keep the population safe. That would become an issue, and also trying to get the consumer confidence back, because all of a sudden you don't want to be sitting at the airport for a long time before you can get to your destination. That'll become an issue. Are there any initiatives that are being talked about in Africa that will be put into place once people start to travel again?
Well, I guess one key decision maker in the recovery will be the World Health Organization, which is working closely with all the governments to see what will be the measures to put in place in the airports before they can allow air traffic. So I am not aware of what is going on now, what are the discussions between the World Health Organization and the governments. But for example, for temperature, it was in place already. In our countries here on the continent, we had it during the Ebola crisis, and then these measures disappeared once Ebola disappeared also. So they came back in December, January, when the pandemic broke out in China. What will be the new measures? Maybe every traveler will or must have a mask, a face mask. I think that would be definitely one requirement before you go to an airport and before you board an airplane. Sanitization, temperature. So this, I would guess, these will be the new measure that we'll have in the airports. I read an article on, I think, Ryanair or one of these low-cost airline company, which disagree with the government advising airlines to fly with only 66% of available seats. And they are asking the government to pay for the 1/3. So I believe these are the kind of discussion which will take place between airline companies and the government, because for me, for a certain period, definitely an airplane cannot be full. There will be some kind of measure to have at least 1/3 of the seats which cannot be sold. So these are the measures I see coming once we have the green light to start traveling and to start staying in hotels. As I said, we'll have these kind of measures also in the hotels. Now we are benchmarking all the regulations and all the measures that all the big international hotel chains are putting in place. All the governments are advising, the World Health Organization is advising, so that we have the customer confidence to come and stay in the hotels.
Terrific. The low-cost carriers, their entire model is built on volume. And if they have to run with only 50% of the capacity, unfortunately, that business model would not be sustainable. So it'll be interesting to see how that whole airlift scenario works out, because low-cost carriers made the connectivity easier and brought a lot of people to some of the markets. But under the current circumstances, when they have to operate at less than optimum capacity, it might or might not work. Last question, and then we'll move on. Do you see any new technologies coming into play, any new disruptors that would come into the industry, either from a consumer point of view or from operations?
Yeah, the one we are having right just now. I think people all of a sudden discovered that, well, maybe they don't have to travel so much. And some meetings, I would imagine, will be on Zoom, on Skype, on Teams. Many people, including the governments. In my home country here in Mali, the government weekly meeting is now done via video conference. So many stakeholders, many people discovered that it's possible to meet, to negotiate, to discuss without traveling. So is it a good news for our industry? I don't know, but probably for the rest of the year, that's what my guessing is. Probably for the rest of the year, for 2020, people will still have in the back of their head this pandemic, even though it's over, even though the World Health Organization will say that it's over, they will still keep it in their mind. I think we will get back to normal, to what we were used to doing probably in 2021. In the meantime, people probably would prefer to keep meeting via Zoom or all these video conference devices.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, I thought this video conferencing has been around for over 30 years when you had to go to a location for this, and nobody believed this will work. It was very expensive, and now suddenly it required such a event like we have now, but with the mobile technology and better bandwidth, you can conduct very easily, like we are meeting here digitally with you and Paul. So and we are a different part of the world, and we are in real time able to do. But because we are in the hospitality, it's still the sort of the face-to-face and also dealing with business. I think that is still the handshake and meeting the feeling of the personality is still, I think, will come back when people are ready to travel again.
Oh, definitely. I mean, nothing is more important than, as you said, shaking hands, talking face to face, having a coffee, having a meal. Well, unfortunately, we cannot have a coffee over our video conference. So definitely, I agree. That's why I said probably for 2020, people will still be in this kind of post-pandemic fear. But then, for me at least, in 2021, people will get back to what they were used to: travel, meet people, shake hands, and negotiate over a table.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Hospitality has always been about bringing people together. So we are a bit of an odds where we have to have physical distance, yet we have to stay connected. But thanks for sharing some of the things that you're practicing. Please stick around. Let me welcome Paul Mack, who is director of the Latitude Hotels. Paul, how are things in UK?
Yeah, good, thank you. I'm fortunately I sit out in the country, so it is not that I'm cooped up in London at the moment, which is good. I managed to contract a mild strain of coronavirus, so I've been down with COVID-19, and that took me out of action for about a week. But the new normal is that we are all operating remotely, as you say earlier. The video conferencing, Zoom, Skype, and the equivalent channels are now the new normal for us to carry on the business. And it's terrific to see all of you guys. And obviously from the more direct side, Mossadeck, lovely to see you again. Last time I think I saw you was in Nairobi, and it's very good to see you again, albeit over Skype.
I think that's what the technology has facilitated, quite candidly, whereas we might have waited to travel to a place to connect with people. Technologically, that is a bit easier to do now. So there are some great things about what the technology has been able to facilitate in a short time period, but yet there are human nature is being together. So I'm sure that will come back. Latitude Hotel is in a growth mode, Paul. Can you just tell us a bit about the state of business, and how do you think moving forward the industry would look like?
Okay. Just by way of a bit of background, we are an owner-operator. We have 3 hotels. They're all focused firmly on the business traveler and the local community as well. We opened our first hotel in Lilongwe in Malawi. We then moved into Lusaka in Zambia, and our most recent opening was back in 2019, which was our largest hotel, which was in Kampala in Uganda. So they're the 3 that we've got open. We've got, as you say, Abid, we're in pretty strong growth mode. We are currently working on a business hotel in Mauritius. We are working on a business hotel in Addis in Ethiopia, and we're also working on a joint venture at the moment in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So we've got 3 open at the moment. We are in a strong growth mode, and obviously the current global pandemic has obviously put us in a slowdown mode as a result of the inability for us to travel, and obviously from the underlying business base. I think it's important to note, we are owner-operator. We have a very strong business footprint. If you look at our mindset, we offer standard hospitality. So we have rooms, we have restaurants, we have bars. We have a very strong social aspect. So the public spaces are typically much larger. They are much more social, inward looking outwards rather than outward looking inwards structures. We operate private members clubs. We operate co-working space as well, which is a comparatively new feature coming into sub-Saharan Africa. And our aim going forward as owner-operators is to continue. And we want to be regarded as the boutique, the go-to boutique name for hotels in sub-Saharan Africa. I think the important element, and it picks up on what Mossadeck was saying, is in terms of the underlying guest mix. And if you look at the mix of our clients, we are upper mid-scale in terms of where our pricing point is. And if you look, we are very strong in the regional travelers, the international travelers, the DFIs, the NGOs, and the local regional corporate, and the local, let's call them middle classes for want of a better descriptor. So we've got a pretty broad base. Tourism and leisure travel is pretty low. It's very much single digits in terms of where we are, and that does flow through in terms of how you see the channels, in terms of how we sell. So we have very small, low percentage reliance upon OTAs and international distributors. So we have very strong repeat guests, and from the local clientele, especially for the private members clubs, and from the regional corporates and the local middle classes, we have very, very high levels of repeat business. I think the important point, and Mossadeck was absolutely spot on, and I couldn't agree more with what he was saying, is the safety and security of our guests and our staff all the way through have to be the paramount, the paramount concerns. And frankly, I think everyone will remember how the guests and staff and people's concerns over their security and their safety, and how companies have dealt with those. I think that's a very, very important element. Similar to the Azalai Hotels, we have very strong owner-operator CSR roots, and we are passionate about how we deport ourselves in the community, with the environment, and with global stakeholders. We put out a CSR report, which was quite a large report last year, where we tried to not only explain what we did, but try and measure and put metrics and benchmarks out there on all of these elements in terms of how we actually impact the communities, how we impact the environment, and we then have metrics so we can measure them going forward. Now, I say that because it's obviously vital as we go through this process. We've taken the view that we wanted to ensure that the security and safety was number one, and therefore not that we needed to in terms of government decrees necessarily in each of the countries, but we have decided to temporarily close each of the hotels because we didn't want to put anyone unduly at risk. Now, obviously, in some countries, there are different social mobility and movement edicts in place at the moment, and we obviously fully need to respect those. But aside from that, we want to make sure that everything is safe and secure. Moving that on, which I think is which was the principal question you had, how are we coping in the current environment now that we've got the hotels closed? We sent our staff out to use up all of their accrued vacation and leave allowances. When they were used up, clearly there was, frankly, very little left for them to do, and in certain instances, because of movement requirements, they couldn't get to our hotels. We have retained all of our staff, so we haven't furloughed any, we haven't let any of them go, we haven't made any of them redundant, and we're still paying them. And we are absolutely passionate about this. We've got just under 400 staff across the three hotels. We have a multiplier effect in terms of the dependence of those staff of somewhere between 4 and 4.5. So if you work your way through, we are directly or indirectly supporting the livelihoods of, one way or another, 1,600, 1,700 people in these African countries. They typically do not have savings. They're typically underbanked. In a number of instances, they will have schooling or university or college debt out there as well, and they will have family debt as well. So, we've taken the view very, very firmly that we will keep on supporting and paying our
Paul,
staff,
that's fantastic.
for as long as possible.
I must commend you. I'm sure there were, the entire industry is going through it. I'm sure there were lots of discussion, lots of very difficult decisions that had to be made. So hats off to you for being able to keep the staff on and keep supporting them, because in a lot of the countries, as Mossadeck was mentioning, there aren't any social systems established that can help staff. I'm going to go back on a couple of things, if I may. How does the industry balance between the fiscal responsibility and the safety and security of it? Even when we start to open, that question will be front and center.
Yeah, I think that's right. When we reopen, and Mossadeck was absolutely spot on again, communications with all stakeholders are absolutely vital as we go through. So whether that's staff, whether it's with the investors, with the board, with the shareholders, the government, the local chambers of commerce, the industry associations, all of these, it's absolutely vital throughout the entire process. Mossadeck also, and I just couldn't agree more with a number of the points that Mossadeck was saying. When we reopen, we will have a different industry footprint in Africa. Anyone who says, okay, we are in a V-shaped recovery and we are going to bounce firmly out of this very firm and hard, and we're going to go back to the old structure, and it's a question of simply time as to how long before we get back to where we were. I don't agree, and Mossadeck is absolutely in agreement as well. I think we're going to have Africa Hospitality 2.0. What is going to be relevant to the community in terms of safety and security, and how will people travel, and how will people interact with the hospitality industry? And I think that is going to change. And fortunately, I think from our perspective, look, we don't have a crystal ball, so we don't know when will be an appropriate time for us to reopen our hotels. And similarly, we do not know when the local economies will start opening again, and when business traffic and the NGOs and the DFIs will start traveling again, and when the regional corporates will want to come back in. However, what we can see in a trend is, my guess is, people will wish to travel and feel safer. And this is safe hotels, where I think the words I wrote down when Mossadeck was talking earlier. And the safe hotel, from my perspective, is there's a feel-good warmth factor. So not only is it from a community perspective, but you feel more in control within your environment. So you're not in a 500-key faceless, large international brand. I'm not disparaging those in any way. I'm simply saying that if you have a 500-key international hotel in a major city, and you have some smaller boutique offerings, which are offering a footprint which the traveler is going to feel is more relevant to them, that they feel more in control of the environment and the surroundings in terms of security, safety, and hygiene, I think that's going to be very, very powerful going forward. So the communication element is absolutely vital going forward. So we keep on talking to our underlying corporate base, and as Mossadeck again said, the reopening program and the recovery programs, where we're working through them as Azalai at the moment, are absolutely vital in that process.
What channels are you using to communicate? Because it's you're having hotels and you're in so many different countries. Just could you share a little bit about your approach to the communication, and what are you using for channels?
Yeah, it's interesting. As we were discussing earlier, Africa was very much again, it's one of those marvelous generalizations, but it was the leapfrog in terms of telecommunications, because it leapfrogged copper. So we didn't have copper wire, and therefore everyone went to 1.5G, 2G, 3G, 4G, and tearing our way through from there, which has driven the mobile banking and the mobile payments industry, which is why that has worked so well there. So the social media elements are increasingly strong, and if you look at the client base that we have a media savvy and a tech savvy population across our countries. I think the median age is about 17 and a half or 18 years old. So we've got a young, tech savvy, media savvy group whom are increasingly completely used to living off one of these for pretty well everything they do on a day-to-day basis. So our usual social channels, of course, we at the corporate level, we see a lot, which is still email traffic, but we are using a very broad suite of social platforms, and I don't think we're quite on TikTok yet. But watch this space. I'm sure someone within our marketing teams have got that one lined up. Different countries have different preferences. So in certain countries, we see Facebook as being a strong channel, whereas in others, Facebook just isn't used, but Instagram and Twitter are far wider used, for example. So we always make sure that we are as relevant as possible in each of those channels. I think it's also important from a communications perspective to be absolutely open and transparent and honest. I really don't think there's much sense in anyone trying to spin these in any way, shape, or form. We are in a global pandemic, and we were talking about the airlines. Air Mauritius, which is obviously another one, which is an important regional traveller, that's filed for administration in the last 48 hours. As Mossadeck said, SAA has been going through a number of changes. Kenyan have gone through a series of restructurings. We hope they manage to sort those out. Ethiopian, which recently took a stake in Malawi Airlines and re-supported the Malawian airline footprint, again has been under strain as a result of this. So it's really, really important that the regional airlines are come out of this on the other side in a way that can promote the international trade and travel. Just one more point in terms of picking up on how, I think from our perspective at Latitude, we see African Hospitality 2.0, or whatever you want to call it. Sorry, I just made that up. Was we were talking about video conferencing, and on one level you say, well, hang on, video conferencing doesn't really help hotels. But I disagree, because from my perspective, we don't do X hundred people conferences, but we do provide a large number of ongoing executive and management meeting groups and smaller conferencing for regional corporates. And what we've seen is an increasing demand even before this this current hiatus for more video conferencing communication, whereby you would find teams clustering in each of our hotels, and then we would be providing the conferencing facilities across the borders, and they would be connecting over our videocom technology. So we would be bringing together the region. Yes, we don't have the bed nights from Zambia coming in to stay in Kampala, for example, but we are providing that service to both of them, and we will be having the F&B and the conferencing and all of those. So again, I think we just need to, and I use the word relevant in a number of times, we need to, as part of our reopening and our recovery program, to make sure that what we're doing is what people are going to be expecting going forward. There's a lot of talk in the press, not just purely from hospitality, but will people be using offices in the same way as they were historically? Will people be commuting the same as they were before? Will people look to try and be more flexible in terms of working from home part of the time? Will there be different footprints? And I can see no difference in the hospitality industry in terms of where that's going. Mossadeck, I said finally, but maybe finally's got a couple of different facets to it. The recovery period, I agree. We expect the NGOs, the DFIs, and anyone else needing to be back on mission to come back pretty strong. The issue there is, and it's different from Ebola or cholera, where we saw an influx of international providers coming into these countries, because this was a regional health issue. Now we have a global. We've seen NGOs and DFIs pulling their staff and associates back to home country. We can see there being a lag in that coming back to Africa, because the first ones were pulled back to their local countries, which were earlier hit with COVID-19, and we expect Africa to be hit slightly later in the global infection cycle. So we can see a slower recovery there than in an ideal world. I agree with Mossadeck. The business travelers, I could see a short-term burst whereby people who needed to get the work done and needed to get the deals done will start back in. Will we see a sharp V? No, I don't think so. But our guess is we're going to see the start of the V coming back up, and then instead of it keep going, it's going to go at 30 or 40 degrees, and then it's going to be a much slower path to recovery from there.
Paul, thank you for that. And before we bring Mossadeck back into the conversation for a couple of questions that had come up, particularly for yourself, because you have been in the growth mode, can you talk a little bit about the capital markets, the liquidity of the capital markets? What does that look like during this time and in post-pandemic era?
Yeah, it's a great question, Abid, because just apropos nothing, I was on a call with one of the large real estate consulting groups this morning, and they said their capital markets business has completely all but dried up, which is entirely understandable. But on the flip side, I could see coming out of this in terms of the potential for distressed assets across the sub-Saharan African footprint. It wouldn't surprise me at all. We always see distressed assets on an ongoing basis. I think from a capital market perspective, liquidity is drying up. The ability to refinance in certain instances, I think, is going to be tricky. So we may well see a sharp spike in A, lower liquidity, but B, distressed assets. And providing you have the capital, I think there's going to be an interesting cyclical rotation whereby there will be some very, very interesting hospitality assets which will be available in 2.0.
Terrific. So let me look up the question that had been sent in. It was, what role can the hospitality play in bringing the communities together? So let me throw that to Mossadeck, if I may, please.
Thank you. Well, as you know, hospitality is about people, so we already bring many stakeholders together. That's our business, that's our role. And I think what this pandemic has brought up is that we are one world. We are one world. What happened 3 months ago, 10,000 or 15,000 kilometers from my home country is now damaging my economy. So we are one world, and maybe that solidarity should be strengthened on a community level. What we have done, as I said, and I must commend what Paul did, not furloughing the employees and keeping the compensation. I wish I could have done that for my 1,200 associates, but definitely we are thinking of some kind of minimum support. Our CFO is working on some scenarios to see how we can bring some support to these employees who do not have unemployment benefits. I think also what we see in our communities today is that there is much more communication between government and the population, between intra-community also, because we all have the same fear. We see that this disease is killing poor people, but also very rich people. The first death in Senegal was a very famous Senegalese who used to be the president of the Marseille soccer club. So very famous Senegalese, very rich, and he died of the COVID-19. Actually, when he died, an airplane was waiting for him to take him back to France, but he died. I think that also is bringing some sense of humanity in our communities. Paul said hospitality 2.0, and I hope you have copyrights on that one, Paul.
I've just sent a message to my assistant.
But we should have now humanity 2.0. Shall we go back to business as usual in 6 months? Or shall we really sit down and see what we can do? We are talking about this pandemic and its consequences on the hospitality industry, but we already had some kind of pandemic. We had the Airbnb shock, but hospitality is still here. And then we had 9/11. Do you remember that 9/11 completely reshuffled the way we travel? We didn't have TSA in the United States. We didn't have all this security control. You just come, you take your boarding pass, and you go to the airplane. That's changed after 9/11. I also think that in the hospitality industry, things will change after this pandemic, and in the communities also. The way we live together, the way we express our solidarity will also change.
Very true. I actually remember traveling soon after 9/11. I was traveling through New Zealand, and they had just deployed metal detectors on some of their airports, and they hadn't even been configured. Our travel life entirely changed post 9/11 era, and I'm sure there are new things will come about after this pandemic. So, Paul, this question may be for you. What sorts of things do you see as we reopen? Any particular sequence? Are there technologies that will be used more so in post-pandemic area than we have used now to keep people safe? Are we looking at staff and guests wearing masks as we interact? Are the menus going to be on their mobile devices as opposed to a menu that gets handed to lots of guests? How does that change our food and beverage offering? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting one. It's one we've been discussing at length because our hotels are very social, and they are type of watering holes for the local communities and the embassies and the FIs and the government and business travelers. So we see these are intrinsically social areas, and the whole concept of social distancing is utterly alien to that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how in 2.0 this is going to work out. Do we end up that everyone's wearing a mask? I really hope not. Don't get me wrong. I want to ensure that everyone is absolutely safe. But similarly, I want to make sure that we've got happy, relaxed, comfortable people. And personally, the idea of sitting in a bar and absolutely everyone 24/7, whether it's in a hotel or if it's in a bar in London, Moscow, or New York, all wearing a mask, that doesn't really give the feel good and the warmth factor. So I'd like to think that in terms of anything trending back to an element of normalcy, we will be able to get back into a more social environment. Now, technology, as Mossadeck said, we're sitting here, we're streaming live. We are in 4 different countries at the moment, 3 different continents. So that in itself makes a big difference. And as the technology has continued to move forward, that has also helped. I think in terms of the seeing the menus online and all of those, I mean they're all out there on an ongoing basis. But we still need to sit down at tables, and we still need to be served by people, and we still need to interact. And we really want to go to the bar, and we want to be able to get a drink, and we want to be able to sit out and watch the sunset. And if we have a 2-meter exclusion zone around us all the time, I think that'll be a real shame. So certainly from my personal perspective, out of all of this, in terms of the community, I hope the communities, albeit we will have changes, will have an element of reversion to a social normalcy, which I'm certainly for one very much looking forward to getting back to.
I think in the short term, whilst we start to move towards the reopening, some of these practices might be put in place for safety reasons, but hopefully before too long we will have an antidote for this virus and a permanent solution, and the human beings being resilient. I think it will come back because it's in our DNA to socialize. We cannot stay away. Technology will facilitate richer content, possibly more togetherness. I think I'm going to invest in holographic communication because that's coming up next, as opposed to just being on a 2-dimensional communication. But I think technology will make a richer communication.
Yeah.
Sam?
Yeah. I think sort of to kind of round up this very interesting discussion, can you share some feel-good story, feel-good anecdotes that you have come across during this time?
Are we starting with
Paul?
Okay, if you want to start. No, I think in terms of we try and operate. We're owner operators. We're a small group, so we can stay a lot closer to our staff than very large groups that have tens of hotels on an ongoing basis. The community and the engagement with our staff and the support that we've had from our staff, and which we've tried to reciprocate back to our staff, has been absolutely phenomenal. And what's the expression? Leaning into the issues and running towards these challenges rather than running away from them. The staff across all 3 hotels have been absolutely phenomenal, and I can only applaud them and thank them, and just hope that we can do our bit from our side to support them as we go forward. As you said earlier, the only thing we know about this is there will be an end to it, whether it's through vaccines or herd immunity or petering out or whatever. We know we're going to come out the other side. So we want to make sure we come out as a community in terms of all of our stakeholders and with our staff and our teams in the same way and with the support that we've had all the way through. That's the real feel-good takeout that I've had from this.
No.
Paul, while you have the camera, and before we go to Mossadeck, maybe something on a personal note, anything you have gotten to really appreciate during this stay-at-home time, anything that any habits that you wanted to get away from that you've been successful in doing?
Yeah, airline food, I would say.
Well said. I think we could all trade a lot of stories on bad sandwiches at the airport or in the airplanes, but let's go to Mossadeck. Can you share some feel-good stories, please? Something that a generous act that you might have seen.
Sure. We get some messages from our customers telling us that they think about us. They know that the hotels are closed, and they think about us. They express their solidarity, and they will come as soon as there is a green light to travel and stay in a hotel. This is really very, very hurtful messages from our customers. We have, as Paul, we have a lot of customers. Some are happy, some are not. But what we see is there is a kind of, let's say, attachment to the hotels, and we get these messages from clients, from customers, And really, these messages, when we read them, it's very heartening. And second, what I see from my staff, from my people, there is much more togetherness, much more solidarity in this pandemic. We have roughly 10% of our staff which is still working on the premises to keep the maintenance, the security of the hotels. And there is a lot of solidarity, a lot of togetherness, and that's something which is really also very heartening, very hurtful to me. It means that in front of a crisis, in front of a pandemic like this one, people really get together and show a lot of solidarity. And on a personal note, and I get now a chance to have dinner with my daughter, which is something I haven't enjoyed for many, many, many years. So now I am at home and I have a dinner with my daughter.
That is fabulous. Well, that's a great way to end our session, Mossadeck. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you for joining us. And before I hand it over to Sam for closing, to all of our listeners, thanks for being here with us live on different platforms. Please continue to send us questions. For our guests, do extend them some digital currency by clapping. Unfortunately, we'll have to feed that sound because there aren't any live audience at this particular point, but we'll have to feed the digital currency. Please stay safe, and we will be with you for our next session a week from now. Sam.
Yes, I'd like to thank very much for Mossadeck and Paul for joining in. It has been a very great discussion. And I was just monitoring sort of the engagement we got on LinkedIn, and we got a lot of applause. So people have been very interested about the discussion, and I can hear that people have been taking note of what they have learned from this session. So I think this has been a very fruitful and really engaging situation this time and episode. So thank you very much for your time and for taking the time to join us. And for the viewers, we will meet again in a week's time. So meanwhile, stay safe and be well, and we will close this session from now.